Hello, students. I hope you are doing great. Welcome back to the live streaming of the daily news analysis. And today we'll be understanding the important news articles of 10th August 2022 with your educator Prithviraj Singh. Let us begin with the session. Well, on the very front page of the Hindu, there was an article about the chess Olympiad, which was being held in India. For the first time, India hosted a chess Olympiad, and it was being held at Chennai, India, in the state of Tamil Nadu. So it's a big achievement for India. We have organized or we have hosted the World Chess Olympiad or the 44th Chess Olympiad. Now we must understand that it is being organized by FIDE or FIDE, which is Federation International de Chess. And as you can see, this was the emblem for the FIDE Chess Olympiad 2022. And as far as the official mascot goes, it was Thambi, dressed in a southern, attire, lungi and the white shirt. So this was the official mascot for 44th Chess Olympiad held in India. Now, as far as the medal tally goes, well, in the open category, Uzbekistan won the gold medal, whereas in the women category, it was Ukraine which won the gold medal, which topped the medal tally. As far as India's ranking is concerned, India Team 2 has won bronze medal or has finished third in the open category. And in the women category, also India has finished third with bronze medal. So very important takeaway. Indian contingent in the open category has finished third, winning bronze medal. India too. And in the women category, India has won third position or the bronze medal. I hope it is clear. As far as the best players are concerned, for the open category, it was David Howell from England, and in the women category, it was Olivia Kiolbasa. Well, there are some other awards which are also being mentioned, like Gaprin Dash Willie Cup. Now, this is a part of the Chess Olympiad, and it is in the memory of the great renowned chess player Gapridashvili from Soviet. And this cup, which is again a part of the Chess Olympiad, was being won by India. Very important. Now, the next Chess Olympiad would be held after 2 years. That means in the year 2024 at Budapest. Right. So these are some important takeaways. I hope it is clear. Now, this is the medal tally. As I said that in the open event, India two team finished third or it won the bronze medal. And the team members were Gukesh, very renowned chess player, Nihal, Pragananda, Abhidham, Adiban, and Sadhwani. So the Indian contingent won, India two team won the bronze medal. India, India team won the fourth medal, right? So there are fourth, it was in the fourth position. But we are concerned with the gold, silver, and the bronze medal, and India two team won the bronze medal. Hope it is clear. Move to the next slide. In the women's category, India team has won the bronze medal as we just discussed, and the team members were Humphrey, Harika, Vashali, Sachdev, and Kulkarni. Well, as I said, that Gaprin Dashwali Trophy is also being played, and it is a part of the Chess Olympiad, and it's being named after former women's world champion Nona Gaprin from Soviet, and is given to the team with best combined performance in the open and women's tournaments. Right. So the sum of their position in both results table, right, both open and women tournament combined, it was won by first teams of India with the United States being the runner-up. So India, first teams of India got the gold medal, or it was being won by first team of India, uh, and the third position went again to India team two. So this is how what we have to remember. In the first slide also we discussed that the Captain India Shivali Cup was being won by India, and in both open and women category, India too and India team won the bronze medal. A very important news article, and I expect a question on this. Yesterday we discussed about exhaustively about the Commonwealth Games 2022. Now, Uzbekistan won the gold medal in the open event we just discussed, and which was their first overall medal in the chess Olympiad. So it's their first medal in the chess Olympiad, while Ukraine claimed their second gold in women's event, having previously won in 2006. So the war-torn country Ukraine has won the second gold in the women's event, as you can see on the screen. So it was the second gold for Ukraine. The last was in the year 2006. Now, the 93rd FIDE Congress, which is the organization to conduct the Chess Olympiad, also took place. That means the meeting of the Congress also took place during the Olympiad. And here, Arkady Vorkovich was re-elected as FIDE president. Very important. Arkady Djorkovich was re-elected as FIDE president, and Vishwanathan Anand was elected as FIDE deputy president. So this is something which you have to keep in mind, that Vishwanathan Anand was elected as deputy president of FIDE. Now, the event was protested by Pakistan, and in fact, Pakistan withdrew from participating in the chess Olympiad, citing the reason that the torch relay, you know, of the event went through the state of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, the regions of Kashmir which are being claimed by Pakistan. And the Pakistani chess delegation had already arrived in India prior to the withdrawal. So, so this is the reason why Pakistan has withdrawn, sadly. So this is how the chart looks. Uzbekistan pipped Armenia and a useful India team to clinch gold, right? So in the open final, it was Uzbekistan, and in the women final positions, Ukraine. And India two men's team bronze in the open final. So it was a team D Gukesh, you can see on the screen, and Nihal Sarin, Pragananda Adiban, and Ronak Sadhwani. And the best Indian men performers were D Gukesh and Nihal Sarin. Similarly, India won women's team bronze. You can see that we discussed also that in women category, India one team has won the bronze medal, and these are the team members: Hampi, Harika, Vashali, Tanya Sachdev, Bhakti Kulkarni. I hope it is clear. Now moving to the next news article. So again, this is carried from the 15th page. The story uh, carried forward in the 15th page. It discusses the same things that we have already understood. Now moving to the next news article on the screen. Well, the WhatsApp has come up with a new privacy feature, and it would enable the users to leave groups silently. Because many times you all would have faced that you being the member of any WhatsApp group, and the moment you want to quit that group or you want to leave out from that group, the message would be shown in the group that such a person has left the group. Right? And this actually many are annoyed by this feature, because most people want to leave the group silently. Correct. So this has been taken the cognizance by WhatsApp, and now onwards they are coming with a new feature where the users can leave the groups, the WhatsApp groups silently, as well as choose who can see when they are online. Because many times when you are just reading the messages or the pending messages, you you come to realize that the other person, your online status is being visible to the other person, right? So if you want to, if you want to ensure that your online status is being kept secret, again the WhatsApp has come with a feature which would allow us to block, allow us to, or in fact, it would allow us to get to have an option who can see us or who cannot, right? So in this sense, our online status can be hidden from many people. Like, at the same time, WhatsApp will also block taking screenshots for view one's messages. Like, so there are many messages which are disappearing messages or view one's messages. So you cannot now take the screenshots of them as proposed by under the new privacy features. Right? So I hope it is clear. Now moving to the next screen. Now yesterday, that is 9th of August, the world celebrated International Day of World's Indigenous People, the tribal communities, right? So the celebrations were underway in many states in India, and they were being organized by the Tribal Welfare Department. So International Day of World's Indigenous People, you all should know it is on 9th August. It's celebrated on 9th August every year. Next news article from the editorial section. Withdrawal of the data bill was a bad move. Now, we all know that the personal data protection bill, which was proposed by Sri Krishna Committee, was being tabled into the parliament in 2018, and it became the draft personal data protection bill. However, because of many objections, it was being sent to the Joint Parliamentary Committee, or JPC. Now, the Joint Parliamentary Committee renamed, the name of the bill from Personal Data Protection Bill to Data Protection Bill. Correct, Data Protection Bill. So they have removed the word personal. After almost 2.5 years of deliberation, they came up with their proposals, but then the central government didn't found them upright, and they in fact withdrew the bill. Let us understand from the editorial section. Now we know that the JPC, which was deliberating over the data protection bill, proposed 81 amendments and made 12 recommendations. And this is the reason which the government is citing, behind withdrawing of the bill. And in fact, they want to fit the bill into the comprehensive legal framework. Now, there were, the government could enact a fresh privacy legislation or a comprehensive data protection law covering both personal and non-personal data, right? Now, personal data is, as per the bill, is that data which, by which an individual can be identified, like your name, your address, so on and so forth. Correct. And non-personal data are those data by which you cannot be identified. For example, the GPS location, the traffic patterns, the demographic data, they all are non-personal data. Right? And your identity is being kept anonymous. So it is therefore called as anonymized data, right? Whereas personal data actually, discloses your identity. So the government could enact a fresh privacy legislation or a comprehensive data protection law covering both the personal and non-personal data. Alternatively, it could subsume the data protection under its ongoing attempts at revising the existing IT Act 2000. Correct. Because we know that the government is attempting to reform the IT Act 2000, which was amended in 2002, and there is also a petition filed by Twitter at Karnataka High Court. And because there are some tweets which the central government asked Twitter to block, and against that order, Twitter went to the Karnataka High Court challenging the order of the central government. Correct. So if this case goes ahead, then there are possibilities, and there is a hope that the IT Act 2000 may be reformed. So the author is contemplating that why not subsume the data protection under the ongoing attempts at revising the IT Act 2000. It could also enact a digital markets law, right? And the same digital markets law is there in European Union's digital European Union, and they have by the name Digital Services Act. Now, the JPC, which did not recommend withdrawing the PDP bill in favor of a comprehensive legal framework. That means JPC didn't recommended withdrawing of the data protection bill. We know that data has to be protected. Your information has to be secured and protected because right to privacy is a fundamental right post case Puttaswamy judgment in 2017. And we know that VN Sri Krishna committee for the first time recommended a draft data protection bill, and the committee released its draft personal data protection bill in the year 2018. Now, in December 2019, the government introduced the personal data protection bill in the year 2019. But the bill was had many lacunas and it was being referred to the JPC for its recommendations. Now, in the year 2021, now you see the timeline from 2019 till 2021, almost 2 years lapsed. The JPC suggested multiple amendments to its reworded Data Protection Bill 2021. So earlier, the name was Personal Data Protection Bill, and now they reworded it to Data Protection Bill 2021 with almost 81 amendments and 12 recommendations. Right? And this privileged the state exceptionalism over individual privacy. So there were loopholes even in the bill, proposed by the JPC or recommended by the JPC, in the sense that there were some privileges to the state exceptionalism over individual privacy, while continuing to strictly regulate corporate action. Well, Justice Sri Krishna has criticized the bill for its potential to turn India into an Orwellian state or a surveillance state, because there are exceptions given to the data protection bill proposed by the JPC. The exceptions in the form of many central government agencies like the CBI are being exempted from the data protection bill, and they can actually breach your data. So therefore, some in order to so-called protect the national integrity and sovereignty of the country. So therefore, Justice Sri Krishna has recommended it as the bill turning India into an Orwellian state or a surveillance state. Now, there are many fault lines in the bill. The first is that bill's expensive exemptions allowed the state to exempt the entire population of the law simply as if it was expedient to do so in the interest of national security or public order. Right? So as I said, that there are many agencies, central government agencies like Enforcement Directorate, CBI, which are being exempted from the data protection bill, and in the interest of national security and public order. But we know that how ED and CBI is being influenced by the executive. So therefore, it could have killed the very purpose of having the data protection bill. And these exceptions did not need to be tabled before Parliament. Right? No provision for review or oversight of the government's decision was being taken up. In fact, a senior member of Parliament, Jairam Ramesh, has said that the government agencies are treated as a separate privileged class whose operations and activities are always in public interest, and individual privacy considerations are secondary. That means he's exploring the worrisome state where individual privacy considerations are secondary and the government agencies are treated as a separate privileged class. The second fault line of the bill was that the PDP Bill 2019, as well as the JPC's version, established a strong regulator, that is the Data Protection Authority or DPA, with a lot of power but very little independence or accountability. Right? So in this sense, it set up a strong regulator called as Data Protection Authority without actually talking about its collegium, and it has immense powers and very little independence or accountability. The third fault line in the bill is that the bill imposed a strong data localization mandate. It imposed It imposes a strong data localization mandate. That means it requires the companies to store all sensitive personal data and critical personal data which was not defined in India. That means all your sensitive personal data and the critical personal data. So we must understand what is critical personal data and the sensitive personal data. Well, the data like financial, health, sexual orientation, your financial status, your health status, biometric, genetic, status, transgender status, caste, religious beliefs are all considered to be as sensitive personal data, SPD. Then you have critical personal data. Anything, and this is very vague and ambiguous. Anything that the government at any point of time can deem critical, such as military or national security data, right? So it all depends on the whims and fancies of the government that which data has to be demarcated as critical personal data. So this is just an example has been given, just say military or national security data, right? So we are clear with personal data, sensitive personal data, and a critical personal data. Now we'll limit ourselves to SPD and CPD. Coming back to the article, well, this bill requires the companies to store all the SPD or the sensitive personal data like your sexual orientation, caste, religion, and the critical personal data which was not defined in India, right? So that means it requires all the companies to store your sensitive SPD and CPD within India. And in fact, the government did not endorse the cross-border data transfer, which is a big sign of worry. The other loophole or fault line in the dot protection bill is the JPC. Right, the JPC recommended subsuming the regulation of personal data and non-personal data within a single legislation, even though it undermined the Puttaswamy mandate to ensure protection of personal data. That means it was subsuming the regulation of personal as well as the non-personal data within a single legislation, right? So here we have discussed the personal data, the data from which an individual can be identified, and non-personal data like the traffic patterns, etc. Correct. So they would be subject to the same legislation, even though it undermined the Puttaswamy mandate to ensure protection of personal data. Well, so this is the these are the fault lines which we just discussed. Now, as far as the internet users in India are concerned, India currently has over 750 million internet users. The government is pushing the Digital India program, and we need sooner than later the robust data protection law. There is a great focus on the interlinking of data, whether through facial recognition, Aadhaar, or Criminal Procedure Identification Act 2022. We know that Criminal Procedure Identification Act was being passed by the Parliament, and it expanded the scope of the of the biometrics of the accused person. Now onwards, the biometrics are not just limited to the thumb impression or the foot impressions, but it will also include the facial recognition, the iris scanning, right, and many other aspects like the like the genetic collection or the gene collection. Now, so therefore, the government under various acts is expanding its list of data, and there is a great focus on the interlinking of data. Now, at the same time, India has among the highest data breaches in the world. It has been reported that around 18 of every 100 Indian have been affected by data breaches since 2004, with 962 billion data points being leaked. Right. So 18 from every 100 Indian have been affected by data breaches since 2004. Now, without a data protection law in place, the data of billions of Indians continue to be at risk of being exploited, sold, and misused without their consent, right? So if our country does do not have a data protection law, then our data is not protected and they may be misused. It may be misused, sold, and exploited without your consent. Now, unlike the state action, the corporate action or misconduct is not subject to writ jurisprudence or writ proceedings in India, because we know that the corporate or the private, non-state entities are not properly funded by the government, and therefore they are not subject to writ jurisprudence or writ proceedings in India, because the fundamental rights are by and large not enforceable against private non-state entities, and this leaves the individuals with limited remedies against private, uh, you know, uh, private players. The proper grievance redress options and creating sufficient deterrence among private actors is the need of the hour. Uh, and even if the PDP bill is not the most privacy respecting law, it provides a certain desirable level of protection to the personal data of individuals, right? And therefore, instead of withdrawing the bill, the data protection bill, the government could have, gone ahead with the bill. So at least we could have had at least a data protection bill, which is there, protecting our data. And definitely, if at all any reform is required, we can always, do it in the future. I hope it is clear. Now, the Personal Data Protection Bill 2019, the key definition, the data principle. Now, data principle is the individual whose data is being stored and processed. Correct. So, if your data is being stored and processed, you will be called as data principal. Now, data fiduciary may be the service provider who collects, stores, and uses the data in course of providing such goods and services. For example, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they all may be called as data fiduciaries. Now, data transfer. The data is transported across country borders in underwater cables. This is called as data transfer. Now, in the bill, the government has denied the data transfer, right? So, government did not endorse cross-border data transfer because the companies are required to store all the sensitive personal data and the critical personal data, in India itself. Data localization is the act of storing data on any device physically present within the border of a country, right? So when you are storing the data on any device physically present within the border of the country, that is called a data localization. Now, the N. Sri Krishna committee draft had required all the fiduciaries to store a copy of all personal data in India, although it was criticized by foreign technology companies that store most of India's data abroad, right? So as of today, the foreign tech companies like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, right? So they all store the most of the Indians' data abroad, right? But the Sri Krishna committee required all fiduciaries to store a copy of all personal data in India. Well, the bill, however, trifurcates the data into three categories and mandates the storage within India's boundaries depending upon the type of data. I hope it is clear. Now, the bill also trifurcates data as follows: the personal data, SPD, and the CPD. We have already discussed personal data as sensitive personal data and the critical personal data. The bill removes the requirement of data mirroring. Now, let us understand what is data mirroring. Only individual consent for data transfer abroad is required. The data mirroring as a concept is the act of copying data from one location to a storage location in real time. Correct. That means you're copying data from one location to a storage location or storage device in real time. Well, personal data, has to be stored only in India. It can be processed abroad only under certain conditions, including approval of the regulator called as Data Protection Agency or Data Protection Authority. We understood critical personal data, which also has to be stored and processed in India. Non-personal data, the bill mandates the fiduciaries to provide the government any non-personal data when demanded, and it refers to any anonymized data like your traffic pattern, your GPS position, or demographic data. The previous draft did not apply to this type of data, which many companies use to fund their business model. Well, the bill also requires the social media companies, which are deemed significant data fiduciaries based on factors such as volume and sensitivity of data, to develop their own user verification mechanism. Now, the bill includes exemptions for processing data without an individual's consent for reasonable purposes, right? That means it exempts for processing data without an individual's consent for reasonable purposes. That means if the government wishes to process the data of an individual without his or her consent for a reasonable purpose, then it can do so. And the reasons are security of the state, sensitivity, integrity, so on and so forth. Now, detection of any unlawful activity or fraud, whistleblowing, medical emergencies, credit scoring, operation of search engines, and processing of publicly available data. Right? So this is all there. The bill calls for the creation of an independent regulator called as DPA, which will oversee assessment and audit and definition making. Right. Now, what are the advantages of the bill? Well, data localization, which can help the law enforcement agencies access data for investigations and enforcement. Now, as of now, much of the cross-border data transfer is governed by individual bilateral mutual legal assistance treaties, right? So today, the cross-border data transfer is being governed by individual bilateral mutual legal assistance treaties, where the social media is being used to spread fake news, which has resulted in lynchings, national security threats, which can now be monitored, checked, and prevented in time. The data localization, which also increases the ability of the Indian government to tax internet giants. So, a very important move. Data localization may increase the ability of the Indian government to tax internet giants. A strong data protection legislation will also help to enforce data sovereignty. Right. So this is there to enforce the data sovereignty. We have to have a strong data protection legislation. Well, as far as the disadvantages are concerned, many content that the physical location of the data is not relevant in the cyber world. Even if the data is stored in the country, the encryption keys may still be out of reach of national agencies. Getting my point? And national securities, what is encryption? You all know encryption is the process of converting a plain text, you know, into a cipher text. Cipher text means a random, ununderstandable text, you know, so that the data is protected. Now, national security or reasonable purposes are an open-ended terms, and this may lead to intrusion of state, into private lives of citizens. Technology giants like Facebook and Google have criticized protectionist policy on data protection, that is data localization. That means the data cannot be sent abroad by the data fiduciaries. Well, Justice B. N. Sri Krishna Committee, he was a retired judge Supreme Court and submitted his report on data protection framework to the government. The committee was constituted by the union government in the year 2017 to deliberate on data protection framework, and in fact, the report has emphasized that interests of the citizens and responsibilities of the state have to be protected, but not at the cost of trade and industry. Well, the committee has also proposed a draft personal data protection bill. Now, these are the key recommendations, as you can see on the screen. All the firms and agencies now have to appoint the data protection officers. They will also act as point of contact for the individuals for raising grievances. The penalties range from 2 to 4% of a company's worldwide turnover, or fines between 5 crore and 15 crore, whichever is higher. The data protection fund and the data protection awareness would also be taken up. Right. So the existing acts such as RTI, Aadhaar, and in fact the IT Amendment Act 2002 will also have to be amended. I hope it is clear. Well, moving to the next news article, again from the world of sports. We all know that the Commonwealth Games recently concluded on 8th of August, and India finished the medal tally at fourth position, winning 22 golds and in all 61 medals. And this is India's third best performance at Commonwealth Games. The best performance was at Delhi Commonwealth Games 2010. Well, as far as the athletes are concerned, we must understand that women's international T20 cricket was being inducted or included for the first time in Commonwealth Games. Well, on the other hand, shooting as a sport has been excluded from the Commonwealth Games this time, and that is the reason why India has lost out on an additional yield. Otherwise, India would have won around 70 to 75 medals. Right? Well, Sharad Kamal, who was also the the flag bearer for the closing ceremony. Uh, you know, uh, along with Nasit, uh, along with Nikhat Zareen, who is the boxer. Now Sharad Kamal has, has one of the, I mean, in a very old age, in 40 years in age, he's defied all the, myths related to age, or the constraints related to age. And in fact, he won the gold medal in the table tennis. Similarly, Saket Sargal was won the first medal for India at the Commonwealth Games. It was a silver, and his story is that of financial difficulties. He used to sell pan at Sangli in Maharashtra. Similarly, the story of Achinta Shiol, who won gold in 73 kilo, category weight lifter. And he and his brother did embroidery. Similarly, PV Sandhu, also, coming from good family, but she also won the medal at, the Olympics, the silver medal, and a brilliant badminton player. Similarly, Lakshya Sen also in the male category, men's category, he won the gold medal at the Commonwealth Games in the badminton. Similarly, Avinash Sable won silver in men's 300-meter steeplechase. And in fact, it is India's prestigious moment where we have won medal at steeplechase. Boxer Nikhat Zareen also landed a solid punch for women power with while her colleague Lavlina Varghans, failed in the tournament. Well, medals were secured in hockey and women's cricket, but they were not gold, as you all know. Pakistan's and even Neeraj Chopra, because of the fitness issues, he was not being called for the Commonwealth Games. And Pakistan's Arshad Nadeem won the gold in men's javelin event. Next year, the Commonwealth Games are also being played every 4 year, as you all would be uh, knowing. Uh, Now, the Indian athletes have to now gear up for the next year's Asian Games, which will be held in China. I hope it is clear. Moving to the next news article on the screen. Well, recently, the Kerala governor uh, is under the news. Kerala Governor Arif Muhammad Khan for actually, rejecting the ordinance which was being, again tabled by the state government of Kerala to him. In fact, this ordinance was to curtail the powers of the Lokayukta, state Lokayukta of Kerala, which is an anti-corruption ombudsman, and this ordinance was to curtail its powers, because from now onwards, it enabled the governor, the chief minister, or the state government to either accept or reject the declaration. That means whatever judgment or decision that the Lokayukta Kerala comes up, it has to be first, intimate it to the chief minister or the any other minister in the government, state government, or the governor. So this actually defies all the logic of having an anti-corruption ombudsman. Correct. So this was the issue, and in fact, Kerala Governor Arif Khan also, termed it as an ordinance Raj. In fact, in one of the Supreme Court judgments, Supreme Court has clearly mentioned that the attempt to you know re introduce the ordinances without actually coming up with any law or passing it into the state legislature actually kills the purpose of the legislature, that is which is the lawmaking body. So therefore Supreme Court also do not has rejected the re-promulgation of such ordinances without the change in the text and without any intention to get it passed from the assembly, right? Number one. Number two, we all know that governor is also, by virtue of his position, he is the chancellor of the state universities. State universities means those universities which are being funded by the state government. Now, this is an extra constitutional power. That means it is not mentioned in the constitution, right? It is not mentioned in the constitution. It is an extra constitutional power. And in this in the exercise of this position, the governor appoints the vice chancellor of the state universities. Now we know that the governor is the agent of the center. He is being appointed by the president, and therefore there is always a bias while appointing the vice chancellor of the universities. It is being said that it is the central government's, wish which prevails, or the sorry, or the central government's preferred candidate is being appointed as the vice chancellor of the state universities. So many states like Tamil Nadu, in fact West Bengal, Maharashtra have come up with a new rule which would actually devoid governor of his chancellor position, and in this way he would not have any role to play in the appointment of the vice chancellor. So the same is also being proposed by the state government of Kerala, right? And in fact, it was being protested and objected by the governor of Kerala, saying that recently, the private secretary of the chief minister of Kerala has appointed his wife, you know, as an associate professor at State University Kannur, for Kannur University. So therefore, the governor, Mr. Arif Khan, believes that the governor should have an active role in the appointment of the vice chancellor, is in the position of in the appointment of vice chancellor, right? So this is an important article which have to be kept in mind. Now moving to the next news article on the screen. How the maiden flight of ISRO's SSLV went awry. Well, we know that the new rocket launcher, that is small, satellite launch vehicle, was being experimented by ISRO, and the first flight, or its maiden flight, was a failure. Right? We must understand, student, there are three rocket launchers. One is PSLV, or Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. The other is Geosynchronous Launch Vehicle, or GSLV, and the third category for the light-weighted satellites at a near orbit of the Earth is being launched. The satellites are being launched by SSLV, or Small Satellite Launch Vehicle. Right. So we'll try to understand the difference between them through the article. Now we know that the SSLV, which was being launched on August 7 from Satish Dhawan Space Center, Sriharikota, was a failure. In fact, it was to place two satellites into the orbit. One was Earth Observation Satellite 2, or EOS 2, which weighed about 135 kilograms, and the other was Azadi Sat, or Azadi Satellite, which weighed about 8 kilograms. Right. So EOS 2 was 135 kg and Azadi Satellite was 8 kg. Now Azadi Sat was being developed and designed by a group of girl students, whereas EOS has been designed by ISRO. Right. Now normally the height for the SSLV is at around 350 kilometer above the equator, and they are being inclined at an angle of 37 degrees. That means they require a circular orbit and not an elliptical orbit, as it is required in PSLV and GSLV, right? So a circular orbit is required. Now that's the reason of the failure for the SSLV. I mean, it was a successful launch, but it failed to place the satellite in the right orbit. Instead, it placed them in the elliptical orbit, right? Elliptical orbit, and this in turn actually, the satellites were, pushed down or attracted uh, by the gravitational force or gravitational pull of the Earth, and they in fact, lost into the space. They were being burnt because of the friction. Now, the EOS 2 was developed by ISRO, offered advanced optical remote sensing operations, whereas Azadi Set was to, was to carry the, was to measure the ionizing radiations in the orbit. Right. There was a malfunctioning of a sensor which resulted in placing the satellite in an elliptical orbit rather than a circular orbit. Right. And the shortest height above the Earth of this oval orbit was only about 76 kilometers, and this actually, resulted into the satellite being attracted because of the gravitational pull, and they are being burnt up because of the atmospheric drag. Right. Now, there was a failure of logic to identify a sensor failure and go for a salvage action accused caused the deviation. Right. Now, PSLV on the other hand is almost successful, launch vehicle, and it places the satellites from pole to pole. That means from North Pole to South Pole, right? And in this sense, it actually, the satellites cover the whole region of the Earth. Whereas GSLV, on the other hand, places the satellites on a very, on much height, somewhere around 36,000 kilometers, whereas PSLV is somewhere around 10,000 kilometers.